Oh, I think I've got this set up better this time for a video on doing watercolour the way I like to do it, without stress, just enjoying the medium. I'm going to use a Fabriano Torchon Extra Rough paper, and I'll show you why. If you look at that, you can see how uneven the surface is, and that gives us lovely textures when we use a palette knife or a credit card to scrape around it. I had already taped it down, and I lifted it up to show you. So I'm just putting it back down onto a bit of 3mm MDF with just using ordinary masking tape. So I'll try and push it down fairly well, but if it lifts up, it lifts up, and I'll push it down again. Okay, when you compare that to the arch paper, you'll see the arch paper surface is very regular. So that's why I prefer this. And actually, I think I've got another piece here, so I can show you again side by side so you can compare. That's the Fabriano Torchon Extra Rough, and you need the light behind it to really see. Sort of looks like blotting paper, and it is a much softer paper, and that's the Arche. Okay, so much different when you compare the surfaces. The Arche is a 300 gram pure cotton, and the Fabriano Torchon Extra Rough I originally got because it was cheaper, and I wanted to provide people with a cheaper watercolour paper when I was selling art supplies. And then I found I actually really liked it for some things, especially textural effects. I think maybe the one I used there. Anyway, doesn't matter. What I'm going to do is just a basic, I don't know, imagination watercolour. So something like this, except I'll use different colours. Am I going to get that in there? Okay, you'll have to imagine it up the right way. I've got a bit of ink in that as well. That's done on the Fabriano Torchon paper, and this one is too. So that one I've lifted a section out of. This paper you can also lift out very well if you're not using staining colours. I'm only going to use 3 colours, which is what I often encourage people to do, even if you're fairly experienced. I think 3 colours gives the harmony. I'm choosing a red, a yellow and a blue, and I tried them on just an envelope from my bank that something came in, and that's the colours I'll get. Sometimes I like these little scrap bits on the envelopes more than my final painting, and it comes down to you don't care what you're doing there, so it sort of often works well. I'm using a red, and this is one I accidentally dropped on the floor and trod on, which wasn't very good for the floor. Permanent magenta in Holbein. They're all artist qualities, but I don't mind if I use different brands. A yellow, and I'm using permanent yellow deep in the Mameri blue. I love the Mameri blue, and you can check and see that this is transparent from that little square. Oh no, I should use this better than my finger if I can see where I'm going. Okay, that little square there that's transparent means it's a transparent colour. If it's coloured in, it's not transparent. So I'm also using Mameri blue. Prussian blue is a cool blue, and again it's transparent because that's clear. And I'm using Schminky ultramarine deep for a warm blue. I'll show you another time about one that's not transparent so you can compare that. So a red, yellow and a blue, and I will, with the Mameri, it's interesting, sometimes their labels are, actually they're not too much different, but this one's nowhere near as warm looking as that, but they're both a warm yellow. So it's a warm yellow, a cool red, and a warm and a cool blue. They're all relative. Okay, so I better start. I find my water here. I've got, because I'm setting up for this, it's a little bit different to what I'm used to, so it takes me a bit to get used to it. I'm going to usually start with my yellow, and I'm just going to put some yellow on here. It's a bit too strong, so that's because I've got fresh paint. Usually my paints have been sitting there for a while and they're not so fresh. Now I'll put a bit of red into that. It's much deeper than what I normally do. I'm not a really strong painter. If I can find where I put my red, it's in a different spot to what I usually do. Whoops. Okay, so there's my red. And I'll add some blue. So I do broad strokes right across the paper. And first I'll put in some ultramarine. So that's my warm blue. And again, just swipe it across, but I'll start from the top for the blue. It's not enough, I need it's a bit stronger. I try not to mix the colours too much, but that's not dropping down like I'd like it to. And I want it a bit darker at the top, so I'm going to come in with the Prussian blue as well, if I can find where I put it in the palette. I think this is it. Okay, that Prussian blue is a little bit too pretty. So what I'm going to do is take some of that with some of my red, and that will grey it off. I more usually paint with ultramarine and permanent red light, but I like a change. Now that's not blending in like I'd like it to. It's a little bit warm in here, warmer than what I thought it would be. So I'm taking a Chinese brush, I've wetted, I'm taking the excess water out of it, and I'll tilt my paper up as well and get rid of that spot, and I'm going to try and blend that on there just to help it move down a little bit. I've got something up there, but best not to take it off now, especially on these soft papers. So there's a hair or something there, and something there, and something there, so you can see three of them. Okay, wait a minute, I'll zoom in and see if I can show you. Okay, those bits of hair or twigs there, and that bit there, but I won't worry about them, because I know that on this paper, particularly if I try and touch them, whoops, oh, I've turned to it, hope you like that. I meant to zoom in again. Okay, there we go. So on this, let's have a look. This bit here, I've got a little bit too much water on there. I'll see if I can just very gently blend that in, but I've got to make sure my brush is not wetter than the paper. That's starting to lift the paint, so I won't do it anymore. This I don't like on the side, and that bit of white there. Sometimes I like the dry brush, sometimes I don't. Okay, that's not looking too bad, that there. You can hold it up and wait. Did I get a drop of water on there? Oh, blow. I did too. So you can see the drop of water here. I don't know how I got that, probably when I was showing you about squeezing out the brush. So I'm going to risk it, and as I'm going to risk it going across, I might as well use my rigger brush to take off that, if I can. I hate it when the brushes lose the hairs at the wrong time. And take off this one. That lifted up better. And take off this one. Doesn't want to lift up. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But you can see what I mean about I normally wouldn't touch them. But if you want to use that to create clouds, that's all right too. Maybe we could... This is where what happens in my paper suggests to me what I might do next. Maybe I can suggest a cloud over there. Sometimes I'll use a tissue to do this, but it can be a bit harsh, especially if you push it down too hard. So, interesting cloud effects here. Certainly not what I was intending to do, but then I'm doing this to show you things you can do, not to make a wonderful painting. That's a bit dark there, so I'll use... So that rigger brush was... Oh, I'm still pushing the dark colour over, which I don't actually want there. I don't mind it so much if it's down underneath. It's shadow under the clouds, but prefer not. Okay, we'll see if that looks like clouds. It doesn't look too bad from here. I've got another spot up there, another little bit of cloud that has to be up here. So it doesn't look like one dot. Okay, I might just dry that so that I don't drop any more on it. There's my hairdryer. So if I do drop a bit of water on it, it's not so drastic then. Okay, there are those cloud effects. I'll just dry it a bit more. Of course, watercolour always dries lighter, acrylics dry darker. Okay, so now we're going to do... This is where the fun starts. We just start with all different things. So I'm going to put some ultramarine I've got on the brush there, and the warm cool red, so that'll make quite a purple colour. Whoops, dropped my brush. Oh well, that's also got to be something else. You're really learning about how I make things up as I go. I bet you've never seen a video of doing watercolour like this where somebody drops the brush and then just goes on. So this brush is getting fairly dry on the edge, which is making nice tree sort of shapes. Now, I'm going to bring some water down from there and tilt my board up a bit so that it encourages that to run down. And remember, I have no idea... Certainly didn't have much of an idea before what I was doing. I have even less of an idea now because it's really is doing its own thing. So a bit of dry brush there, which I quite like, and a bit over here. That, because I put the water on up there, that edge is softening off. So it's playing with the water. It is watercolour. It's not an acrylic painting. It's not an oil painting. It's not a watercolour illustration where I might very carefully draw up the shapes and fill in. This is a playing with watercolour just for the sake of playing with the way the water behaves and the way the paint behaves in it. So it really is play, which a lot of my artwork is. That's not to say I don't think of things deliberately. Like this here, that shape takes me out too much. I'm going to bring this bit up on this edge with a bit more dark. So I might even put a bit of the Prussian blue in there if I can find it. There it is. Aren't the hockey brushes or hakey brushes or hake brushes, whichever way you want to say it, just wonderful for the amounts of things you can do with them. See, that edge there is just created with the edge of the brush. And then sometimes I will just spray down, except my water's not working. And I can blow it The darks you put on later, and if the paper's dry, they'll stay dark. If the paper's not dry, they'll dry lighter. I want to link this up in here a little bit. Trying to keep some contrast in the centre of interest, so that dry brush there is nice, and I'll use the rigger brush just to give a few linear outlines. I didn't mean to put that dot there, but that's all right. That's a bit like me dropping my brush. If it happens there and it doesn't look too bad, or sometimes it's even good. The happening can even be, you know, something you didn't plan that can be quite nice. Sometimes, like that bit there, it's not so nice. I didn't mean to put a real dark bit there, but that's what it wanted to do. That's where the brush decided to go. Because I hold it very loosely and I just let it dance around the paper. So I might use this to bring your eye down through here a little bit more of the red. I don't clean my brush out a lot in what I'm doing, unless if I was going back into pure yellow now I would, but if I'm getting it darker, then I'll just pick up more of the darker colours. So a bit more red there, a bit more red again, not picking up much red. Okay, now we have. I want this to lead my eye around. I don't like that hard bit of edge there, so I'm going to use another brush just to soften, to lift that off. I didn't want it to go exactly like that, but that's the way it's gone. Oh, I haven't done any of my brush drag across, which is why I use this paper. Okay, so I'll put some more colour on here. Not that I wouldn't have done this, except that I want to show you the technique with the other brush. It's quite a nice colour anyway. It makes it prettier rainbow effects. Bit more blue in, especially to lead your eye into there. And then I will get, if I can find where I put it, can't see my credit card, which is what I was going to use, but I can see the palette knife, so I'll use the palette knife. Okay, if I drag that across there, see those wonderful marks it makes? Now, you won't get that on the arch paper. You get a much more looking like a fly screen mesh type look. But on this, you can get some really interesting shapes. I'm not cutting in, I am dragging the palette knife on its side. And I probably need a bit more of that colour up in here too. These are all transparent colours, as I said, so, and when I'm putting that on, I'm just putting it on very, very lightly, just teasing the surface of the paper rather than pushing the paint down. A few little linear marks. Don't actually like them, but that's all right. Okay, I'll go back to my rigger brush. Okay, a different rigger brush, because I've done what I often do, misplaced it, and it's not even in the pot of water. I'll dry it off a little bit, and then the darkest darks are when it's dry. Because as long as it's wet, the water will dilute the paint, so you get a light colour. Okay, I've made a dark up of my two blues and the red, so just keeping with the colours I've got there, and I'm using a new rigger brush on the dry paper, and what I'm doing is picking up the shapes that are already there, and a bit of dark under the darker bits, some dry brush across. So by dry brush, I haven't actually dried the brush out more, but I'm dragging it on its side. that's too big a white shape up there, so I'm just going to break it up a little bit. So although it's sort of random, it's not completely random. I actually think in the end about little bits like that maybe I would prefer to change. That's like a nice rock face. I did love geology when I did science teaching, so you find that suggestion of rocks and rock textures and things appear in a lot of my works, as well as the biological things like, yes, more biological study type things. You can even outline some of these shapes if you want. Now, one of my students often says, so what is it? You know, what's that shape there? And I say, oh, I don't know, it's a shape. What do you think it is? If you think it's something, it's something. If you don't know what it is, then it doesn't, does it really matter? It's just a shape. A bit more dark there to bring you to the centre of interest, and I can overdo it by texturing and patterning over the whole lot. I don't want to do that, but maybe I'll put a bird in. Again, for the bird, I use the rigger brush, and I'll show you on here how I do it first.